recently I was able to ask my own mum about the birth of me, and that came through doing the first moon facilitator work and realizing how all our rites of passage relate back to the moment we were born. So I could see the resemblance of what had occurred for her had played out for me as well too. But I had felt this through my first birth. But I truly believe having a girl, something is different. It changes you because you have to look at your own feminine. You can't deny it.
Welcome to Wildflow, the podcast with me, your host, Charlotte Pointeau. I'm a wild feminine cycle coach here for the awakened woman who is ready to reclaim her body, menstrual cycle and feminine power, and to live, love and lead in flow with nature's wisdom. In this podcast, I'll share how you can live in sync with your menstrual cycle and life seasons, heal your relationship with your womb and rites of passages, and embody your wild feminine as a multi-passionate woman in life, mothering and business. It's your time to flourish as a cyclical being in this modern world. Are you ready? Let's flow. Welcome to Wildflow. In this episode, I sit down with Rowena Hobbins, who's a dear friend of mine and a woman who I consider to be one of my business besties and partners in crime. Rowena and I are both life coaches through the same school, and that's how we met. And since that time, we have collaborated and co-created, with Rowena being the person who encouraged me really wholeheartedly to create and run the First Moon Circle Facilitator training. And Rowena was one of my very first students in the course. We've been working together in the First Moon Mastermind for all of this year so far, and have sat in so many circles and talked at length about what we have learned about connecting with our bodies, our menstrual cycles, and our rites of passages. Rowena is really passionate about supporting women in their own matrescence, which is the journey from maiden stage of our life into becoming a mother and understanding who we are as women and what we bring to the world as mothers, as well as what we bring to our children, that rite of passage. And talking to Rowena over this last year and a half has been really beautiful for me. And now I'm so excited and grateful to be able to share Rowena's story with you, because she has much medicine and insight for all women, particularly if you are a mother, and if you want to learn more about the rite of passage of motherhood as well. So I hope that you enjoy this and that you find wisdom in here, and it's nourishing and supportive as a conversation. Rowena is mother of 3, entrepreneur, business owner, creative spirit and intuitive being, and she has lived through so much adversity on many levels. After giving birth to her second child, a girl, something awakened in her, and she had a profound change in heart in who and how she was living her life, which led to a huge shift in what she was creating for herself and her family. Stepping away from the dichotomy of life, as well as the pressure she felt to be a certain mother and human, she realized that life had just begun and change needed to happen in order for her to be her best self. This opening allowed her to come to peace with much of her consistent anxiety and heavy emotions of the past, feeding herself more self-belief into seeing herself as a whole instead of broken in her feminine. Rowena currently runs sacred women's circles as well as one-on-one intuitive soul guidance sessions, where she works with women to help them see how they can come home to themselves whilst feeling completely supported and open-heartedly held with true safety in the freedom of being perfectly imperfect. Rowena has also trained as a First Moon Circle Facilitator and will soon be running her very first circle on the Gold Coast. Today I've got Rowena Hobbins on Wildflow. Thank you so much, Rowena, for being here. I'm so excited to chat with you. I've been looking forward to this conversation with you for so long. You're such a dear person to me, and we've had such a big last year together, particularly. And so I really I'm grateful and excited to talk all things menstrual cycle awareness and rites of passage, and about you and your work and raising up as well. So thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure, Charlotte. And I feel so lucky to be here on this journey with you too.
Thank you, lovely. Well, let's begin with a cycle check-in, if that sounds okay to you. I'd love to know whereabouts you're coming from in your cycle today and how that feels for you today.
So I am day 27 in my cycle, which means I am in my autumn, leading into my winter. And I am definitely feeling the movement in my body. The changes have definitely started to happen. The need for dark chocolate is definitely coming out thick and strong at the moment. But I'm also noticing a change in my body, because today is the first day of spring as we're recording. And so it's also my birthday month. So I can feel my body aligning into that as well, and coming out of that inner winter season inside too. So I definitely feel a change in this autumn season. It's a lot lighter. It doesn't feel as heavy. It feels a bit more joy, a little bit more hope, starting to rebirth more ideas. So it's been actually a quite nice ride this time around, this cycle.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. So you're saying that we've got the overlapping seasons. So there's your menstrual cycle, you're in your autumn coming into your winter. It's also the end of a cycle of the year for you. Your birthday's coming up, and then we've completed winter and we're moving into spring in nature in the southern hemisphere.
Yeah.
And how those are all overlapping, and you know, even though you're in your autumn, you're feeling like you're having ideas, and it's kind of a spring as well. So that, you know, two opposite points in the cycle, but it's love hearing how that is for you.
Yeah, it's definitely something I think in the past year I've definitely taken a lot more attention to as well. So it's just definitely been giving myself more space to breathe in that autumn period too. So really honouring who I am and all my wholeness too.
That's really beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, honouring your wholeness feels so good to do at that time when everything's shifting and it can be really challenging. And so just letting all of that be and giving yourself space to be all of that, really powerful. Thank you. Yeah. So Rowena, excuse me. So we're here to talk about your experience of your rites of passages and how that's influenced your experience of being a woman, from your first bleed through to motherhood and the children that you have, and now to being a first moon circle facilitator, a women's circle facilitator, a women's coach, an intuitive healer, all of these things that you are and do, and so much more. I just would love to ask, first of all, for you to explain to us, beyond those labels, who you are as a person.
Oh, wow. I think I feel for me deeply inside that I am a very creative person. So I think that's really come forward in the last year, that I've really accepted that I am a creative. And even when I hear a label put on top of me, it's still hard to accept. It's, you know, that idea of, you know, shying away from being something in the world, and how, I guess, you know, it was from a small country town, and we were always kind of taught to play small and not to have attention drawn to us as well too. So I think it's really coming into the idea of having my own inner power around that too. So I think I'm at this place now in life where I'm really accepting of myself, which is also leading me into really accepting others as whole people. And I think that really includes a whole person, not just the good parts, but the bad parts as too. And I think the experiences that I have had, which have led me to this point, keep teaching me that we're just always unveiling another layer of who we are. So, yeah, I think at the core of it, I am a creative. And yeah, I think that power of the womb as being the ultimate creator really empowers me to help empower other people as well too.
Yeah, I love that. So in your business, which is called Raising Up, you talk a lot about, as you're working with women, helping them to access their own empowerment and honoring their raising up moments. What's a raising up moment? Could you tell us what that is and how you came to discover this concept of raising up and raising up moments?
Yeah, for sure. And I've spent so much time trying to define it because to me, it was emotion first. And again, like I think using the words around it, and I came across something maybe 2 months ago and I quickly wrote it down. And to me, it was about honoring our own personal legend. And if we're not in alignment of our own personal legend, it becomes this moment of where there is a breaking of us. Something happens as the ending happens of the old version of us, and we're called into our raising up moment. And I guess for me, what I've realized, I thought I had my raising up moment, but I'm realizing there's actually lots of raising up moments.
Yeah.
Like it's not this linear pattern of growth. It's just bumpy, like a mountain. You climb it and then you climb back down again. Then you climb another mountain and it's like step after step. So I feel like raising up to me was when I first labeled the business, I wanted to be incorporating the idea around motherhood and helping women into raising their children. And I came from being a teacher for nearly a decade. So I really wanted to incorporate that somehow. And that word just kept coming to me was raising. And I just knew that that would be part of my business name. And also for me, it was about my initial rites into passage with motherhood probably really didn't have the breaking point happen until the second birth of my second child. My first was a little boy and my second was a female. And it's taken me actually even till this year to realize, because I birthed a female, that was when it really cracked me open into understanding more about my feminine self.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So it's this concept of raising up, like raising your children, but also raising yourself within that, I feel like.
Yes, totally.
That'd be true. Yeah. And so you talked about the rites of passages and, the rite of passage of having children and how each one is, I've found that, after having 3 children, and you have 3 children as well, that each birth is a huge rite of passage in itself. It's not like you become a mother the first time and that's it. You're done. It's like you said, this evolution and this keep cycling back around these, you described it as like the mountain. You go through these, you reach these peaks or you come through this rite of passage, like this opportunity, this huge transformation that happens. It happens to you and like within you, and it's like within your body or your soul, and it's not something that you cognitively, like mentally understand what's happening, but it's happening undeniably, and it takes time to really process, doesn't it, and to kind of work out who you are on the other side and what happened. And so what does life look like now, and what matters to me, and what's not important? What are your priorities, and how do you want to live, and who do you want to be in the world, and what's it all about? And with each birth, it happens again and again. And as for me, when you were just talking about the first birth that you had, it didn't really crack you open. It wasn't until your second, and you had a daughter. And I've got three daughters, and I was just thinking, my first birth, after she was born, the whole of the first year at least, I was kind of shell shocked and just a bit like, oh my God, like, what is this? What's going on? Who's going to help me do this? How do I figure this out? Who am I? Like, it just didn't feel, nothing felt the same. It felt like I could see beyond this veil, but didn't understand it and didn't really want to walk behind it into this other world properly. It's very much kind of straddling, going, do I go back or do I go forwards? I don't really know. And there was just no talk in birth education or even friends that I had. And I was one of my first friends to have a baby. And I became really, really close friends with somebody who'd just had her second at the same time. And she was like my huge support during that time. But, really, there was just no talk of it being a rite of passage or about the fact that it was such a transformation for me. It was just all about the baby, from the baby shower to all the prenatal, to anybody asking anything before or after she was born. It was always about her and, how's the baby and what's, how she was growing and going. And, there was might have been the odd question like, oh, how are you going? But surface level and not really wanting to ask much more. And, it wasn't until I had my second baby as well, when the same thing happened and I got the other side and just went, hang on a minute, enough, enough, that I need help too. Like, who's helping me? Where's my kind of, the acknowledgement? I kept just thinking, like, there's no acknowledgement of what I've been through. Like, nobody else can see it. It's just this within, it's like in your cells, in your bones, in your body, this really deep sense of like just not being the same person at all anymore. But outwardly, it just looks like you've had a baby and nothing else has changed, and you just carry on. And, the idea of what you're talking about, of raising up, like having this place for mothers to be supported in their postpartum, that rite of passage, and beyond postpartum, it takes, the old saying about it taking a village to raise children. We just don't have that anymore. And I feel like that's what you're talking about, is having this, you have this place of acknowledging that actually this is pretty massive. And like, you can see, you can look at a woman and like, I see you, I know what you're feeling and experiencing, even if you can't put words to it. And even if other people can't see it as well, I can. Does that feel true for you?
It's just, it's so beautiful. And just thinking about that too, just all of it as well for me. I knew when I had my first baby, we had him when I was 32, turning 33, and we were older parents, but we had been together for quite some time. And I had a very serious professional career where I dedicated a lot of my time to that and being a real perfectionist. So when I had my first baby, I was in the veil too. And it was almost like that love bubble had swept me up. And I think I was really shocked with the discussions that weren't happening around me that I really needed to happen. And I just wanted to be really vulnerable with people too. And I think outwardly I was trying to hold up this image still of perfection that I was carrying through from my maiden stage. And I think when I had my second, there's only a 2-year age gap between my first and my second. I just didn't feel like I'd honored the pregnancy in the second time around. I didn't get to honor it like I did the first. And then when I had her, it was quite a difficult birth as well too. It brought up a lot of feelings of isolation that I probably hadn't really truly recognized. And I had friends around me who had had children, and I had a very good friend that really guided me even to wanting to have a baby and be pregnant and to be a mother, and modeling myself off what she was doing. But to ask her for help was very hard to do. I found that extremely hard to say to somebody, could you just come and help me? And I think that was probably the thing that I struggled with the most with the second. And it was just the feelings of isolation and feeling like maybe I'm not good enough, so don't show it outwardly because people will think something's wrong with you. And I was like, well, where is that message coming from? Like, why do I feel that way so deeply about myself? And I think that was probably the time when I really started to really dig a lot deeper after I had my second about why am I feeling like this? I've ticked all the boxes. I've gone to university. I've had the career. We've got the house. We've done all these things. Why do I still feel like I'm not a complete human? And it really perplexed me because I had these two little people that were so needy of me to be a whole person, and yet I didn't feel like I was. So it definitely felt like I needed support, but I needed people to witness me as well and say that it was okay what I was going through. So, yeah.
And so from that place, did you feel that, you know, missing that for yourself, you wanted to be able to give that back to other women?
Absolutely. I felt like there was such a gap in everything that was around me. And I think that's when I started to attend circles. So I actually started going to craft classes because it was a way to get out of the house. And I actually ended up meeting a life coach who I kind of laughed at because I was like, oh, life coach, ha, ha, ha. I kind of didn't take it very seriously because I'd studied psych at uni and I had a degree, and I was like, oh, that's just a bit of a, hoo-ha, whatever. And funnily enough, I ended up doing coaching with her, and it was the reason. And then I had like these little whispers come in going, you could do that. You could help women. You could support women. You could do this, And so I guess I did a lot of work. I did, layers upon layers of all these different types of training, and really like stretching myself into places that I didn't think I would ever, things I would never do. I remember going to an exercise class, and it was a yoni exercise class with the kids, and she had a dancing vagina, and I was like, oh, this is way too much for me. I don't know. And now I am the owner of a vagina puppet.
I'm just thinking about it. That's quite funny.
It was
how
just
far
really,
you've come, my love.
I know. I couldn't even say the word bleed, like a couple of years ago. And I think it's just, I just think I was really stripped so raw so that I could rebuild myself. And I think that was my raising up moment, really just seeing that the life that I thought I was meant to be living was really just a chapter in the whole story.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that, without making assumptions, has to be true for a lot of women. That's the power of motherhood. It's a real shift. It's a real course, not corrector, but it just this huge, rite of passage that you go through where, you come out the other side and you can't go back. You're not the same, and you've seen things and felt things that you can't unsee and unfeel. And I feel like, it's probably true that, we live our lives, we sort of, grow up in, that maiden years that you talked about, up till around the age of around 25 or motherhood, or, about sort of 30-ish probably. And, we're living the life that we think we want to have, and we're figuring out who we are and what our place in the world is. But becoming a parent, it just strips away so much of that illusion of what you think you are and who you think you are. And a lot of the shoulds kind of get stripped away, and, society's kind of, value and worth that's placed on the young woman, and, what we think success looks like. And then moving into motherhood through giving birth and raising children, it's like, everything just changes in an instant, and it takes time to land on it and to find out, who we are, and, the power of what we can really do in this lifetime. There's so much that comes through mothering, in this culture that does not support mothers and women in some of the ways we've touched on. And there's so much needed around us. There's so many mothers are struggling, whether they allow other people to see it or not, because I too had that experience of feeling like, I've got this, I can do this. I don't need you to tell me how to do this. And my way of wanting to mother, I went into pregnancy, I'm going to be this kind of mom and that kind of mom, and that I'm going to do that and not do that. And, all of that just didn't really matter. It emerged as I became a mother, and, realized like how things felt to me. And, that's like my body was telling me like that feels good and that doesn't feel good, and a lot of advice that's given to us is about how to raise your children, but not necessarily in ways that maybe are aligned or that feel good, or, certainly not in raising you as the mother. So I think the work that you do, you're offering such a valuable, powerful, truly important space. And I think that I can just imagine the women that would work with you just feeling so seen and felt and understood and acknowledged in this really powerful, really confusing time. And, for me personally, when I had my third child, who was a surprise, at first I was horrified and thought, how can I cope? And it took me really quite a while to come to terms with how was I possibly going to cope raising three. I just didn't feel like I had the time or the energy or the bandwidth, the emotional bandwidth. And I certainly didn't have the support. I felt like I just had no support to be able to do that. And it was horrifying. It took quite a lot of, a lot serious inner work. Took work in my relationship as well to kind of break down some of the structures and the lifestyle that we'd had, and to talk about what we really needed. And as a couple and a family, our values and priorities had to change. And I absolutely had to really dig deep to become this mother of three. And for me, that felt like a really powerful raising up moment for me, of feeling like I'm not on my own, because I called in friends and community, and to birth the way I wanted to birth, and to redefine or allow my life to just kind of melt and reset in a way that suited all of us. But it took so much inner work, so much. And that for me was, during that pregnancy, was when I found my power, in the work that I do now. It absolutely came from that third birth and pregnancy that I don't know if I would be here today if I hadn't have had that experience. It's such a profound thing. And, not all women have children. So, it's not something that, every person experiences in this way. And even women who do have children and have been pregnant and birthed children, not every person gets to be aware of the power of this rite of passage that's happening, that you're being pulled through. We can resist it and we can soldier on and push through and not feel the depth of what's happening. And, you're still having this rite of passage, but not letting it kind of work you into this new version of yourself and this power that you have. But, what I really love about the menstrual cycle is that it's like a mini rite of passage each time almost. And I really love thinking about it like this because, like I say, not everybody has children, but if you have a menstrual cycle, it's like you have these opportunities where every cycle your bleed, is like, it's like the birth. It's like this moment of letting go everything that you have been in the last cycle and welcoming in who you are going to be for the new cycle. Have you had any experience of anything like that, Rowena? Like, I know that you've become really connected with your cycle. You know where you're at in your cycle and how it feels, and how each season and cycle feels for you. But how do you compare or contrast, or how's that feel to you?
I so relate to everything that you have just said. And we actually connected, I remember, over a post on my Instagram over the three children story. And our third was, I always knew I was going to have three. I'm from a family of three, and I always felt like somebody was missing for me. I had baby fever and I couldn't get or move things that were babyish away from me. It was just like I knew she was coming. And I felt like for the third birth, I stepped into my power. So for the first birth, I felt like it was just almost like a very silent opening, where it was this time where I was just very accepting of everything that had to happen. And it was a vaginal birth, but for my second, I had to have a Caesar, and I would cry and cry and cry over that because I just felt like I didn't have a choice in my second birth, which really related back to my own birth story from when I was born with my mother, which I really want to talk a little bit more about too from the work that I've been doing. But with my third birth, she was such a big baby, and the obstetrician, who was so lovely, he gave me the choice of either having a vaginal or a Caesar. And I chose to have a Caesar, and it was so empowering because I knew I was doing the right thing by my body, and I had fought it so hard in the second birth that choosing it for the third birth just had so much power in it. But everything, even in pregnancy, I felt like I was me finally. Like I had walked through the rite of passage with my second, even though it was quite difficult and hard. It opened me up into a greater divine feminine. And I just feel as though that energy that came with it really opened me up into my own fullness. And I could see even in my periods too, like after I'd had her, that my energy was of being full force, and it was beautiful. I felt like I had finally arrived in life, if that makes sense. So it was just a really deeply nourishing time. And I even had some of the nurses comment to me on how it was a really memorable birth for them. My obstetrician was excellent. He had the screen down so I could see her actually being born. And it was just a really special moment. It was just this time that I really relished. And I've said this to you before, Charlotte, but I feel like the first baby is the baby that you have for each other as a couple. The second is the one that you have for the sibling. But the third, it was for me, for sure. She was for me. She was for me to prove, after I'd had that very rough birth with my second, I had doubted my own feminine. It was lost. And that's where the raising up moment came, to decide, go back and do birth. And it just really healed a lot of wounds, the whole C-section the second time round. And we had a friend who actually was at both births. She was a photographer, so she photographed both births. And she just said to me it was such a healing one, the second birth after the first Caesar being so traumatic. But yes, I really related so much of that to, like, when I started to really think about that birth and, what was so defining around that time in my life. And we lost someone really close to me when I was pregnant with my second. And also it was just a really intense pregnancy, to the point where I felt like I was really alone. And recently I was able to ask my own mum about the birth of me. And that came through doing the first moon facilitator work and realizing how all our rites of passage relate back to the moment we were born. And so when I think about my second birth with my little one, mum was telling me about how she was actually in hospital for 2 weeks previous to the birth with me. She was actually quite sick, and she was alone for most of that time too. And then when she birthed me, she had a matron in the room, and that was about it. And she didn't have her family for support as well too. So I could see the resemblance of what had occurred for her had played out for me as well too. But I had felt this through my first birth. But I truly believe having a girl, something is different. It changes you because you have to look at your own feminine. You can't deny it. And, with my little guy, he's so beautiful, and he's the masculine, and he's all the eminence of, what I love about my husband. He's this, so I guess there's not that mirror reflection that you do with when you have a girl. And so for me, when I was pregnant with a girl, things started to stir in me that I hadn't felt since I was a child. And so I was able to sit with my mum and have a moment to really go through the birth with her. And it was really interesting to see parts of my birth had resembled so much of the birth of all of my children. So it was definitely a definitive moment too.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's so powerful. To hear your birth stories and, your own birth story as well. And yeah, I completely just thank you so much for sharing, Rowena. And I really love what you just said then. And it made me think, having our first daughter, it's like us looking at our own inner child. When it's as a girl, it takes you back to little you and how vulnerable, makes you realize how vulnerable they are and how much they need us, and they need shelter and love and connection and all of those things. And there's such a rush to want to give that to them. And for me, it really brought up tenderness of, like how I sort of had this feeling of seeing myself as a brand new baby and thinking, gosh, I wonder how it feels to be that little, and to, that imprint, like you say, the imprint of birth shapes all of our future rites of passage, including our first bleed. It's an imprint. Imprints, like you say, all of our births, and how we also approach our menopause and our death in the end as well. And for you, Rowena, you've given me permission to ask you, about the lineage as well that you come from. And because, you talked about your birth imprinting your own rites of passage in your life, one of the things that we talked about a lot in the First Moon Circle Facilitator training that I know set you on this path, or revealed new things to you on this path, is how not only does your birth imprint your rites of passage in your life, but so too does the rites of passages and lives of the women who've gone before you in your lineage. And how we carry this imprint in our body, through our womb particularly. It's in our felt senses in our body, but also imprinted through our DNA, and how the environment that we live in, it turns on and off genes within our bodies that ultimately changes our physiology and influences the way that we live and who we are and how we show up in the world, and that being called epigenetics. And we know that so much is passed on from generations past, and that your mother was adopted, wasn't she? And through talking to your mother, you have also had reflections about how that feels, how your connection to your lineage feels, and you talked about it as being a breakage. And I would just love if you're happy to share what you've discovered in connecting or in realizing that your mother was adopted, and how that sits in your womb story, your lineage.
It's been such a journey, because I think from a child, when we always knew mum was adopted, but it was never really a big deal, if that makes sense. And I think anyone who's been adopted, I think they deal with it in their own way. And so my mum was adopted by a much older couple at the time too. And she became estranged from her family, as were her adopted family. And we relied quite heavily on my dad's grandmother, who helped me through rites of passage. And she was very loving and kind to my grandmother, and she was like a second mother to my own mother too. But my mum always, there was a sadness for her there, and we knew that was sad. But she always, it just felt like a tap had been turned off. And as children, even as young adults, we never really question it because mum didn't, if that makes sense. But I think when I had my own children, I started to see a change in my mum too, and how she wanted to connect with her family. And I think the thing with adoption is, once you've opened the door, you can never go back. So, you open the door and you can find out things that maybe you don't want to know about. And in my mum's case, she didn't get the connection she thought she would have when she did open that door. And it opened up some things for me that I had denied of myself, that had been passed down, about the connection. And I think the hardest thing for me was when my children would come home from kindy and ask us about our lineage, and they'd be singing songs from other cultures, and I couldn't give them a true indication of what our, heritage was, and that hurt. And we still have a lot of question marks over it as well too. But maybe about, I think a year ago, I did a initiation practices into Reiki. And so when they attune you, you go into a room and it's very, it has so much ritual and honor to it. And I see in Circle when women come, people come thinking that the circle is what releases it, but it's actually the person brings with them what they already need. And it's just Circle facilitates it. And I feel like this attunement was what I needed to. So for me, in that meditation process of attunement, I actually had a vision of an elder from my mother's side, and she kissed me and gave me what I needed to feel reconnected. And it went back many generations. And it showed me that the disconnect had been from mental health issues, which we had known about, and other things that had played in there, but that this work had been done before, of women's work in the lineage. And I was really grateful for that vision too. It really opened my eyes. But also my paternal grandmother, she also was quite a religious woman, and she would hold what I know now as Circle, but she would work, she was a soldier in the Salvation Army, and she would hold Bible study, but it was with women, and they would sit in Circle. So I feel like there's a deep connection on both sides. And so, you know, I know that when my children do ask me questions, there are a few little question marks still that we are working out. But I can see how my story, what I thought was my story, had been passed down for many generations through the womb of disconnect and feeling that having a baby wasn't a right. It was just something that happened, and that I needed to really do the work, that I was here to do the work and to help heal the broken links. So I really hope that my girls can go forward now without that trauma attached to them, and that they can feel like they are seen within their generation, and that they have connections deeply to the women around them as well too.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing. That's incredible. I can imagine how beautiful that would have felt to have those visions of the women in your past, and to know that about your paternal grandmother as well. To know that they're with you, or they're walking with you, and that you're bringing back that strong feminine through your lineage, and offering that to your girls and to all of your children and your grandchildren, and to the lineage in front of you. That's amazing. I just feel called to ask you, has there been any practices or rituals that you have found have helped you to come back to that place, like to your feminine, your womb, or to help bring you back to that lineage as well?
Yeah, I think for me, I definitely call upon a lot of memories that I have with my paternal grandmother. So things that she would do, just little things like she was very resourceful. They were from the time of, just after post-war, and where they had to really ration out everything. So I think like whenever I peel an orange, I always save the orange skins and dry them in the oven, and then I leave them next to a candle and light it and say thanks for her. And then I also try to intuitively pull on the feminine side, from my mother, and call upon that. And I see that in meditation a lot now too, and that's of comfort. So I think that's how I pull in on that too. And I think too, something that I've really come to discover now is that it's okay to have a voice and, not to be scared of my emotions. So I think really plotting out my cycle and seeing that when I am in my autumn, that it's okay if I feel anger, and it's okay if I feel resentment, or it's okay if I feel certain things. And, they're signals to me that something's going on with me that I haven't paid attention to, that I can't just slip it under the rug and just hope that it will go away, because I know that's just not going to happen anymore, that I just really need to pay attention to what's going on. And just really seeing that, I look at my mum, and, this year in particular has been quite hard because she was diagnosed with a very rare form of skin cancer. And so they had to treat it with radiation. It was quite horrific. And it really made me witness my own mortality, and really to take stock of being kinder to her story, whereas maybe as a teenager, I wasn't as kind to her around her story, and to see how, even though we don't think our parents' story and our grandmother's story does impact us, it actually does. And that we need to see that it can stop here, the parts that we don't want, it can stop here. And that even if you don't have an opportunity to connect to your lineage in the traditional way, that there is other ways that you can do that as well.
Yeah. Wow. So really hearing that you have, beautiful rituals that you do with the orange pill. I adore that, and lighting a candle for your grandmother, as well as connecting in through meditation and just building on that and allowing, I imagine, that to strengthen over time in practice. But also really hearing you and loving what you're saying about how this can come up for you in this premenstrual phase of your cycle, which is, very classically a time when the heavier, denser emotions can come up for us, of all the ways that we have felt, that we haven't been supported, particularly as women, can really, really come up at that time. And that being a perfect opportunity to notice that, like you said, rather than just burying it. Because when you bury it, you take it through to your next cycle, and it repeats, and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And really sitting with what you're feeling and allowing that to be. And I think there's so much power in that, in women owning their strong emotions like anger and rage and resentment, and they're just being emotions and messengers, like you say, of what's going on underneath, rather than us fearing them, suppressing them, swallowing it, hiding it. So long as we aren't harming anybody with it, it's so important to dig underneath, like what that's telling you, what it's about, and letting that go with your bleed. I just think there's some really useful tips. So thank you. I'd just love to ask, how in the world do you have a vision for how women, with stories similar to you, with disconnection or broken lineage, of how we can be normalizing or bringing more awareness and support to this? Because as you've shared, it's so powerful. The stories of the women before us do impact us, and we have a chance to heal that or carry it on and pass it on. How do you believe that we can be better supporting women to acknowledge, understand, and to feel supported to move through this?
Oh, Charlotte, I just love that. I think for me, like now that I can see the way that I process emotions and how I present that to other people too, is the idea that previous I would have hid and tried to not be in that limelight of something's wrong. And now I will often, as weird as it feels, if I see a woman struggling with a baby at the swimming pool, or if I see a friend that I know that something's happening for them, I will just reach out, and not even a how are you, but what's happening at the moment for you, and just starting the conversations. And sometimes it might be that you don't get anything back, and I know that that person isn't ready. Sometimes it could be a slow burn where I always try and offer sanctuary to anyone that needs it and open arms. But I think realistically, going back to a point in my life where when someone shows vulnerability, it's really important to show them love and that you've witnessed them, and not so much that they need you to give them advice or for any help, but it's more that they're just seen and they don't need any help, but they just want to know that they're okay because they feel that way. And I think too, like coming from a broken lineage, it is feeling like that there's a story of you're not wanted, and it gets passed on. And it's something that I've seen through all my rites of passage, is that it's the hiding and it's not making a big deal about anything. And I think too, women need to be able to say to anyone that they feel really comfortable with and that they trust, to open up and even just stop their routine, stop their day, and give themselves some grace, and also just have a break, have a time out from what's happening, but also to try something a little bit different away from what's happening in their world, just to keep them going. Because I feel like the idea that we place on mental health, the research around when women go into doctors, and even friends who've said to me they've gone to doctors and they've had a down moment, and it's been in their autumn, and they've said they feel a certain way, and they're met with medication or other types of things that aren't very supportive to them. I just want to be a point of difference in society where we sit together without our ego. We sit together in love and compassion, and just to be witnessed, I think, is so vital for every woman that comes past me. That's all I want, is everyone to know that they've been witnessed and not judged on who they are.
I'm just really taken by what you've said there towards the end, that women reaching this point of feeling like their emotions are so much that they go to doctors and ask for help as the only means to finding help that they know, is to go to the doctors and then to be met with medication, and this pattern that they're all coming often, this pattern of being in the premenstrual phase of the cycle in the autumn. Wow. And as mothers, like you say, so much of what we need is, as women, as people, as humans, but particularly at these really intense times, is just to be listened to, given a space to share, to talk freely without judgment being such a powerful one. And judgment not just from other people, but to be encouraged to not judge ourselves for it as well, and to acknowledge and welcome the wholeness of ourselves, like you said right at the start. I think that's incredibly powerful. And for me, that's what women's circles are, that's what we do. But the women's circles are growing. There's more and more of them, and they are popping up, especially online now as well, with restrictions, but and they can be more accessible when women can't find a babysitter or a single mums. And I encourage anyone listening to try and find a women's circle near them. It can be so daunting, that fear of judgment, the fear of, but also the fear of what might come up and out of ourselves in the first time we go to Circle. I know that that was true for me, and I hear other women speaking the same fears of, you know, what might be accessed if I'm looked in the eye and invited to talk, and what if it all comes spilling out and I don't know what to do with it. And I know that you hold really beautiful circles, Rowena, really beautiful circles. So, you know, I think if anybody listening just feels like they could do with some, you know, a beautiful listening ear, please reach out and find Rowena. I'll include her links at the end. So thank you, Rowena. Is there anything else that you'd love to share before we close about this topic?
Can you hear me?
I couldn't at first. Do you want to just go again?
Yeah, sure. I just really wanted to reiterate how important rites of passages are, because when we look at the links between our first menarche to our rites of passage into motherhood and how similar they are, it's so important for us to educate young girls so that when we go through our rites of passage in motherhood, but not only motherhood, into perimenopause and menopause, where it comes out even more, the suppression of these emotions that we've held on so tightly. I think that we are really being called now with all these women's circles that are coming through, that we need to really honour the work that we're being asked to do from all our ancestors. You know, they're all lining up behind us saying, you know, this is a really great opportunity for us to change. The idea that women have to be alone in the mission of, and we can do this together.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not just work for us, is it? It's work for the past and the present and the future. And yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I just wanted to ask you as my closing question to you, you know, as you've jumped deeper into menstrual cycle awareness, you know, and connecting with your body, your menstrual cycle. I mean, obviously we've talked about rites of passages here, but, you know, is there anything further to what you shared, or what would be the biggest thing that you have learned from this process, or what's the biggest thing that's been, or the most potent thing that's been revealed to you through connecting with your cycle?
I think that it has been that when you're ready to sit in the energy of yourself, that what you were dreaming of is right there. It's so much more potent, and that you are able to access other parts of your life that you weren't able to access before. And I think that the witnessing of your own feminine allows you to witness others, and then they can witness you too. So I think it's not just about looking at yourself and your cycles, but it plays into every part of your life, the essence of your being. It spreads out into everything that you do. And it's a great magic that we should all have access to. So I really strongly believe in that, and push it quite hard with anyone that I talk to as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So it's not just something that you connect within yourself. By connecting with your cycle, you're connecting with your inner feminine essence and energy, and you're able to witness that and see that in others as well. That's really profound. I'm gonna sit and reflect on that for a while. Thank you. What a beautiful illumination. Oh, well, thank you so much, Rowena, for sharing, you know, your story, but not just your story, the story of your lineage and your ancestors before you as well, and sharing what your rites of passages have looked like and felt like, and how that has brought you to not just your inner power, but your medicine for the world, you know, and for your future, your children and grandchildren and lineage ahead of you. But you know, through the darkness and the challenge and the rebirthing, you've had, you know, what you call your raising up moments that have really landed you in this place of being able to give back what you needed at those times. And the more of us that can do that, what a powerful world that we are birthing collectively. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks, Charlotte. Thank you so much.
So if anybody would like to connect with Rowena, she is on Instagram at raising_up_, and her website is www.raisingup.com.au. Thank you so much, lovely. What a beautiful, beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for listening in. If you're loving this podcast and you'd love to help me spread the wisdom shared, please leave a review or rating, or share this with somebody who you think would love to listen in. I'm really passionate about creating ripples of change and getting this information to more women, girls, and people with a cycle so that they can reclaim their cyclic natures too. And if you'd love to dive in deeper with learning more about how to connect with your cycle and rites of passages, come and join our free Wild Flow Circle community, or choose a course and learn with me on my online learning hub. All the links are in the show notes. And until next time, be well and go with the flow of your cyclic nature.